think we've all had the moment where we're decluttering and we decide to go all in and tackle an overwhelming space all at once. But a lot of us end up in this defining moment where we look around and we are so overwhelmed and we're surrounded by chaos. As you're pulling out the boxes or the bags, sometimes the clutter problem gets worse. Now the clutter is bled out into these other spaces in your home and you're like, why did I even do this? And this is often what turns people away from decluttering, the sheer overwhelm of the project, and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. So today we're going to dig into this really common mistake. And I'm going to offer you some tangible ideas on what to do instead. I will never forget the first moment I was inspired to tackle my closet. I had just read Marie Kondo's Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and I thought, light bulb, I need to simplify. That's the answer, right? And so I decided to tackle my overwhelming closet. And the reality was I only got through part of my closet. And guess how long it took me? 6 hours. I pulled everything out, which probably took 2 hours of the 6 hours. I pulled it kind of outside of my walk-in closet and into my bedroom. I was ready. And then in a matter of hours, I was fizzled out. I had massive decision fatigue. I didn't want to try anything on. And I was so overwhelmed. And while I did make a little bit of progress, no doubt, I got rid of a few trash bags of things. The project was too overwhelming for me to finish in that go, right? 6 hours? Come on. I was done. And I also didn't mention most of the time I had my young babies in the room with me. Whew, it was not a good memory. And the reality is, in very few circumstances does this work well because the average American home has so much stuff. In fact, the average American home has over 300,000 items in it. And I'm not knocking the method, but I do think there are better options for a lot of us with busier lifestyles and who, like me, had 300,000 items in her home, probably even more. So I want to rewire your brain today that if you think you need to tackle a space all at once in order to make progress or just because that's what you should do, we're going to do it differently. This actually reminds me of one of my coaching students in my inner circle. Her name is Susan, who joined my coaching program, and she actually chuckled with me on our first call. And she's like, you know what really inspired me to declutter last year was watching one of those home organization and maybe even renovation shows where I was on Netflix and she saw the before and after, the clutter and the non-clutter, right? And she's like, I felt so ambitious and motivated. So she tackled her doom room, her junk room that was in her house after watching one of those shows. And just like me, within a few hours, she pulled everything out. She was in a state of chaos, had this huge mess on her hands. And she was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Honestly, she said for 3 months, all of that stuff that was once hidden, at least that's a benefit of it and being in a room, was now in her hallway. It was in her living room. She was tripping over it. Yet she was like, I don't even know what to do. What did I do? Right? And so this was obviously one of the first places we tackled together during the program. And within just a few weeks, she was able to get results, but it took new perspectives. It took strategy. It took a lot of support from Coach Katie, but she realized decluttering doesn't need to look like that for me. And it doesn't work for everyone. It's kind of like going out to run a marathon without ever having run a 5K first or any run. A lot of runners make it look easy to run the Chicago Marathon, but the reality is for a lot of us, we need to have a lot of practice runs. We need to have a lot of walks to build up our stamina and our muscle. Same thing applies here. It's almost always better to start in smaller spaces or with a smaller volume of things and do shorter spurts where you can take 10 minutes, make a lot of great, effective decluttered decisions and come back to it fresh the next day or even a little bit later in your evening. And I kind of already hinted at a big reason why tackling an overwhelming space at once typically ends up crashing and burning. And it's 2 words: decision fatigue. Day after day, we are faced with many decisions, aren't we? They can be big and small: what to wear, what to have for breakfast, what to pick up for dinner on the way home from work. They can be decisions that involve family, money, and obviously decluttering and organizing and all the things, right? It's exhausting even for me to just think about it. And the stress of constant decision making can really wear on our mental health. And if you find yourself on a regular basis overwhelmed by the thought of making another decision, then you might too be experiencing decision fatigue. And here's the thing. Guess what activity involves a lot of decision making? Ding, 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 ding. You got it. Decluttering. When we have decision fatigue, subconsciously our brains are going, do I have have to make this decision right now? Can I handle this later? Right? And we already know what happens next. Procrastination, and a huge benefit of doing it in smaller chunks of time, 5, 10, 15, even 30 minutes is fine, will reduce your decision fatigue, just like we did with Susan, and you will be way more effective. And the reality is you will be much more likely to finish the project. And the few occasions we're tackling an overwhelming space, like a garage, a junk room, you name it, where it can really be fruitful is when you have a big support system of people doing it with you. So you can offset some of those decisions, right? And not hit decision fatigue so quickly to these other people. And while a lot of us don't have that type of support one-on-one, maybe from family or hired help, this is what Susan used me for inside the coaching group. Be it virtually, it still really helped her. Plus, when you do it in small chunks, it creates and enforces the habit of decluttering. Remember, we're talking about a lifelong skill here, not a flash in the pan method or system. I still declutter my home on a regular basis. People look at me like I have 3 heads when I say that sometimes, but it's in small chunks, 2 minutes here, 30 seconds there. And once you learn to avoid this all or nothing trap, then you can really start to make progress on decluttering, finish out some spaces that have been bothering you for years, and just gain so much momentum. And have it serve you instead of stress you out. There's a bit more heart to it, isn't there? Click the video on your screen now to learn about the emotional weight of clutter.